The envelope was still sitting on my kitchen table when my daughter called to tell me not to come. It was a Tuesday evening in October, and I remember the light outside had gone that particular shade of gray that comes just before the sun gives up entirely. I had already ironed my blouse. The blue one, with the small pearl buttons my late husband had always said matched my eyes. I had already looked up the parking near the school, already planned to bring flowers, yellow ones. Sophie's favorite already imagined her face when she spotted me in the third row. "Mom," my daughter said. And even in that one word, even before anything else, I heard something careful in her voice. The kind of careful that means someone has been rehearsing. "I was thinking maybe you should skip the play tonight." I set down my coffee cup. "Skip it," I said. "It's just Kevin's whole office is coming. His boss, the partners, some clients. It's kind of a professional thing for him now, you know? And I just think it might be easier if—" "Easier," I repeated. She exhaled. "You know how you get, Mom. You cry at everything. Last time you came to one of Sophie's events, you were sobbing before she even walked on stage, and people were staring, and Kevin said—" She stopped herself, but not in time. "Kevin said what?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. And in that pause, in that small, careful silence, I understood something I had been refusing to understand for a very long time. "It's just one play," she said finally. "There will be others." I told her I understood. I told her to give Sophie my love. I hung up the phone and stood in my kitchen in my ironed blue blouse, and I looked at the envelope on the table. It was from my bank, a summary of my automatic payments for the month. I had been meaning to file it away without opening it, the way I always did, because looking at the numbers had started to give me a kind of vertigo I didn't want to examine too closely. That night, for the first time in years, I opened it. 91 payments. That was the number on the page. 91 automatic monthly transfers going out of my account. And when I sat down with a notepad and started going through them one by one, I counted 43 that went, in some form or another, to my daughter and son-in-law's life. Their mortgage, his car lease, her car insurance, the grocery delivery subscription she'd signed up for because she didn't like shopping, the streaming services, 4 of them, Sophie's violin lessons, which my daughter had told me twice she was going to start contributing to once things settled down, the HOA fees for the neighborhood they'd chosen because it had the right zip code for Kevin's image, the pest control company, the lawn service, 2 gym memberships they rarely used, a meal kit subscription, Sophie's school supply account, a storage unit they rented for furniture they didn't want, but also didn't want to get rid of. I sat at my table until after midnight. The yellow flowers I had bought were still on the counter in their plastic wrap. I want to tell you who I was before I became the woman sitting at that table, because I think it matters. I spent 31 years as a registered nurse in Charlotte, North Carolina. I worked nights when my daughter was small because nights paid more, and I wanted to give her what I hadn't had. I saved carefully, the way my own mother had taught me every spare dollar set aside. No debt I didn't have a plan for. When my husband passed, 11 years ago, he left me the house paid off and a life insurance policy that meant I would be comfortable if I was sensible. I had been sensible. I had also been generous, because those 2 things had always felt compatible to me. When my daughter married Kevin, I liked him well enough at first. He had an easy smile and a firm handshake, and he talked about his career the way men do, when they're still building it, with a mixture of confidence and hunger that seemed reasonable at 32. What I didn't see yet was that the hunger wasn't really for achievement, it was for the appearance of achievement, which is a different thing entirely. The payments had started small. Their wedding I had offered gladly. The down payment on their first apartment, I had offered that too. When I saw how much they were spending on rent, when I thought it was a loan that would be repaid, it was not repaid. Then the house, when Sophie was 2 and my daughter said they needed more space. I co-signed. I helped with closing costs. I told myself this was what mothers did. My own mother had done less for me, only because she'd had less to give. The problem wasn't the giving. The problem, I understand now, is that I gave without ever making the shape of it visible to either of us. Each payment became invisible, almost immediately, absorbed into the ordinary texture of their life, and then it became expected, and then it became infrastructure. The floor beneath their feet. You don't thank a floor for holding you up. You stand on it and plan your next renovation. There were signs. Looking back, there are always signs. The first time I noticed something shift was at Thanksgiving 3 years ago. I had driven up from Charlotte, brought my sweet potato casserole the way I had every year since Sophie was born, and when I arrived, my daughter met me at the door with a look I had never seen on her face before. Apologetic, but also somehow impatient. The way you look at someone who has arrived too early to a party you're still getting ready for. Kevin's parents were already there. They had flown in from Scottsdale. His mother had brought a catered dessert spread from some bakery, and his father had shown up with 2 bottles of wine that cost more than my drive-up had. I watched my daughter arrange the bakery desserts on the center of the table and move my casserole to a side counter, and I told myself it was just logistics, just space. Not everything means something, but it did mean something. It meant that the family that had the right bottles of wine got the center of the table, and the family that paid the mortgage stood near the side counter. I said nothing. I stayed 2 days and drove home, and told myself I was being sensitive. The second sign was Sophie's 14th birthday. I had planned to take her shopping, just the 2 of us, our tradition since she was small. My daughter called 3 days before to say Kevin's office was doing a team birthday lunch that weekend for a colleague, and could I possibly take Sophie the following weekend instead? I said yes. The following weekend, something else came up. We never did go shopping that year, and when Sophie's birthday photos appeared online, I saw that my daughter and son-in-law and Kevin's parents had taken her to a rooftop restaurant downtown, the kind with a waiting list, and no one had thought to mention it to me until after. I asked my daughter about it, gently. She said it had been last minute. She said she knew I'd understand. I did understand. That was the trouble. I understood it perfectly, but understanding something and accepting what it means are different things, and for a long time I chose understanding and refused acceptance. Because acceptance would have required me to look clearly at something I had spent years not looking at, that I had been for a very long time. Welcome as a resource and inconvenient as a person. After the phone call about the play, I couldn't make myself not look at it anymore. I didn't call anyone that night. I didn't cry, which surprised me. I had expected to cry. I had been expecting to cry for about 3 years, honestly, the way you expect rain from clouds that keep moving overhead without breaking. But sitting there at my kitchen table with my notepad and my bank statement, and the yellow flowers going soft in their plastic wrap, what I felt was not sadness. What I felt was something very quiet and very clear, like a room after furniture has been removed. I knew what I needed to do. I had known for longer than I wanted to admit. The next morning I called my bank. I did not make a speech. I did not send a warning. I had thought about whether to warn them, whether fairness required it, and I had thought about it carefully and honestly. And the honest answer was, I had given them the warning. I had given them years of soft, invisible warnings every time I felt something shift and didn't say what I felt. Every time I rescheduled my own plans because theirs had changed. Every time I transferred money for a bill they hadn't mentioned in months, as though it were oxygen I was supplying, not labor I was providing. I had warned them in every language except the one that would have been uncomfortable. That was my failure, and I owned it. But it didn't mean I owed them the formal notice they had never given me before, uninviting me from my granddaughter's life one event at a time. The woman at the bank was professional and patient. We went through the list. 43 payments, canceled or redirected over the course of 2 phone calls that day. I left 2 payments alone. Sophie's violin lessons and her school supply account. Those, I transferred, instead moved them into a separate custodial account I set up that afternoon, one my daughter had no visibility into or access to. I called my attorney the following week and added a provision to my will, a trust, for Sophie's education, structured so that neither of her parents could touch it. I want to be honest about how it felt. I want to tell you it felt powerful, triumphant, the way people in movies look when they've finally made a decision they've been afraid of. It didn't feel like that. It felt like setting down something very heavy that you've been carrying so long you'd forgotten what your own hands felt like without it. It felt like relief. And relief, at my age, feels like its own kind of grief. My daughter called on a Friday 2 weeks later. I was in my garden when the phone rang. I had been replanting the corner bed, the one that had been neglected since summer, and I had dirt on both hands. I looked at the screen. I set the phone down on the patio table and let it ring. I listened to it, and when it stopped, I went back to my garden. She called again that evening, and the next morning. On the third call I answered. She didn't say hello. She said, "What did you do?" I said, "I think you know what I did." "Mom." Her voice had a quality I hadn't heard in it before, cracked and a little breathless, like someone who'd been rehearsing anger but found something else when she opened her mouth. "Do you understand what this does to us? The mortgage auto pay didn't go through. Kevin's car got a late notice. We have a system." "You had a system," I said. "That's you can't just—" She stopped, started again. "Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you come to me first and talk about it?" And I sat with that question for a moment, because I wanted to answer it honestly, not in anger. "I've been saying something," I said, "for about 4 years. You chose not to hear it. When I asked about Sophie's birthday, you said you knew I'd understand. When your father-in-law's wine went in the center of the table and I went to the side counter, I said nothing, but I felt it. When you called and told me not to come to my granddaughter's play because Kevin's colleagues might find me embarrassing, that was the last thing I was willing to absorb quietly." Silence. "That's not what I said," she said. But her voice was different now. "It's what you meant," I said, "and we both know it." She started to cry. I recognized the sound she had cried like that as a little girl, that particular pattern where the tears arrived before the understanding did. I didn't fill the silence. I had spent too many years filling silences that she needed to sit in. "I didn't realize," she said finally, "which was and wasn't true. The truthful version was closer to, I realized, but realizing made me uncomfortable. So I rearranged the furniture in my mind until it didn't bother me anymore." "I know," I said, and I meant it. There is a way that generosity can make people smaller, if it asks nothing of them. I had loved my daughter too much to ever ask anything of her, and in doing so I had helped build a version of her that I didn't fully recognize and she didn't fully inhabit. I was not without blame in this. "What are we supposed to do?" she asked. "What people do," I said. "Make a budget. Look at what you actually spend and what you actually earn and close the distance between them. Kevin has a good job. You have a good job. You have been living a life-sized for 2 incomes plus someone else's savings, and it's time to live the life that's actually yours." She didn't say anything for a long time. "Sophie keeps asking why you haven't called," she said finally. Something moved in my chest at that. "I've been waiting," I said, "for her to have a number she could reach me at that didn't go through you first." There was another silence, and in that silence, I heard my daughter doing something I couldn't quite name. Some internal recalibration, some small and overdue accounting. I wasn't certain what it would add up to. I wasn't certain she was capable yet of the addition. "I'll have her call you," my daughter said. Sophie called that Sunday. She was 16 and a half, and she had her father's directness and her grandfather's voice, low and warm and unhurried. She said, "Grandma, Mom told me some of what happened." "What did she tell you?" I asked. "She said she hadn't been taking care of you the way she should have. She said she was going to try to do better." A pause. "She cried a lot." "She did with me too," I said. "Were you mean to her?" I thought about that. "No," I said. "I was honest with her. Sometimes those feel the same." Sophie considered this. She said, "You're not paying for my violin lessons anymore." "Your violin lessons are still being paid," I said. "By me. They just go a different way now." Another pause. Then, "Okay." And I could hear in that word and the whole compressed economy of that one word that she had already understood more than her parents had given her credit for. Children usually do. They live in the same house, after all. They hear what's underneath the furniture. "Will you come to the spring concert?" she asked. "I have a solo. I've been working on it since August." "I'll be in the front row," I said. "Third row is better," she said. "Better acoustics." I laughed. She laughed too, and the sound was like the light coming back after October. There are things I want to say to anyone who might be sitting where I was sitting at a kitchen table late at night with an envelope they've been avoiding and a phone call echoing in their ears. I want to say, the money was never the point. The money was just the language we were using for something else entirely. For belonging, for being valued, for taking up space in the lives of people you love without having to justify that space. I had been trying to purchase belonging with the one currency I had in abundance, and the tragedy was not that it failed. The tragedy was that it almost worked. Almost. For just long enough that I kept renewing the subscription. Generosity is not the same as love. Generosity is a behavior. Love is an orientation. You can be generous with people you resent, and you can be entirely ungenerous with people you love deeply. I had spent years being generous and calling it love, and somewhere along the way my daughter had learned to receive generosity and call that love too. We had built a relationship made entirely of money and silence, and when I removed the money, what was left was just the silence, which finally had to become words. I do not know yet whether those words will become something livable. My daughter and I speak on the phone twice a week now. It is careful. The way things are careful when they're new or newly repaired, you handle it differently. You pay attention. She has not asked me to come over yet. I have not asked to be invited. We are in the process of learning how to be two adults who love each other instead of one adult and one open account. Kevin has said very little to me directly. He sent a text, 2 weeks after the payments stopped, that said he hoped we could sit down together soon and talk things through. I replied that I hoped so too. We have not sat down yet. I hold some space open for the possibility that he is also capable of growth. Marriage can sometimes teach people things that parents couldn't, if the person is willing to learn. Sophie's spring concert is in April. I have already looked up the parking. I will bring yellow flowers, and I will sit in the third row, as instructed. I will probably cry before she even walks on stage, and if Kevin's colleagues happen to be there and happen to notice, I will not be troubled by that at all. I am 68 years old. I worked nights for 20 years to give my daughter a life with choices in it. I keep a garden. I still have my late husband's cardigan on the hook by the back door. I took care of strangers in hospital rooms for 3 decades, and I know what it looks like when a person's body is trying to tell them something they don't want to hear. I know it from the inside now, too. What I know most of all is this. You cannot keep someone from taking you for granted by giving them more things to take. You can only stop and wait and see what they do with the silence, whether they fill it with demands or with the long, difficult work of finally seeing you. I am still waiting, but I am waiting from a different place now. From a place where I sleep through the night and work in my garden in the mornings and know that the 43 payments no longer leaving my account every month are not absence. They are space. Space I made. Space I intend, finally, to live in. The yellow flowers from October are gone, of course. They didn't last. But the ones I'll bring in April will be fresh, and Sophie will see them from the stage, and she will know that her grandmother is the kind of woman who shows up. That has always been true. It just took removing everything else to make it visible.